Welcome back to another edition of the podcast. And the greatest league in the world, well, in my opinion, is returning tomorrow. The Enterprise National League. We're guaranteed to be entertained. We're guaranteed to see surprises, but we're also guaranteed to have some absolute shockers and looking foolish every single week when we do our game week predictions. And of course, it's that time of the year. We're back with the first one, the first set of fixtures that we're going to be previewing tonight. Tonight, I'm delighted to be joined by Joe from offthelineblog. Joe, firstly, how are you doing?
Yeah, cheers for having me on, Luke. Yeah, good to be back. Obviously, pre-season's now done and dusted, getting ready for the proper stuff. And yeah, looking forward to it. Actually, come home today for Torquay's first game tomorrow against Enfield. So yeah, looking forward to it.
Yeah, of course, for yourself as well. That's one thing. National League South again for Torquay. A little unfortunate last season. Of course, this is a National League podcast, but I think we should just touch quickly on that because you were so close. But of course, it was Boreham who managed to progress and are in the Football League now.
Yeah, obviously, Boreham and Truro in the National League. At the end of the day, the table doesn't lie after 46 games, and Truro were worthy winners. And obviously, when we got in the playoffs and had to play Boreham, I think many Torquay fans probably feared the worst. Was certainly the one team they perhaps didn't want in there was Boreham. But yeah, they're in the National League, and yeah, good luck to them. Good luck to them both this year.
100%. So, of course, the National League. I should have mentioned, actually, you've just released a book as well. There's actually about the National League, about players that are coming up through, well, players who've gone on from the National League all the way to the Premier League, such as Jamie Vardy. Do you just want to tell people who are listening a little bit about that?
Yeah, so a couple of weeks now it's been out, Diamonds in the Rough. And yeah, as you say, it looks at players who have started out not just in the National League, but right down in non-league, and try to shine a light on their journeys really throughout the system of non-league and obviously then English football. Obviously got the likes of you mentioned Jamie Vardy. Obviously Dwight Gale as well on the cover. He's obviously retired this year as well. Obviously a number of ex-Wealdstone players, the likes of Stuart Pearce, Jermaine Beckford, etc. But yeah, lots of players throughout the ages, not just modern day, but also going back in the archives. And yeah, trying to shine a light on where they've started, because we all know where Jamie Vardy and that started, but there's perhaps players that have gone on similar journeys who perhaps we don't know about. So that's what I hopefully try to bridge that gap with my book.
Yeah, brilliant. And I want to talk as well about the National League as a whole. 5 newcomers, potentially 6. I think we're all hopeful it will be 6. It's unlikely. It's not looking likely, I should say, at this stage. But I think when a new season comes around, it's good to kind of analyse each club that's coming up into the division. While I'm with you, let's quickly talk about the first side that's been relegated from the EFL. And of course, that is Carlisle United. Their first spell in the National League in 20 years. I think it does feel like they're very well equipped for this division, better than a lot of sides. However, when you've been away from the division that long, sides are often seen, the bigger sides when they come down, to be quite naive, and potentially that's the only minor issue with Carlisle United at the moment, is there's this expectation they're going to go straight back up. And I just think it might be a little bit harder for them. How do you see it going?
Yeah, I think they'll certainly expect to be up there. And given the squad that they've got, the manager they've got, and you'd imagine the resource and the backing they've got, they should be up there. Even though obviously the getting relegated from League Two can be quite a tricky adjustment for teams. I think they will adjust fairly well. I don't think they'll get promoted this year, but I do think they'll be in the playoffs. I put them second in my predictions. And I actually think they'll adjust pretty well, because they've gone out and signed players, but they've signed a number of players who actually have played in this league before and got promoted from this league before, the likes of Aaron Hayden, Sedwin Scott, Callum Whelan, etc. So, yeah, they've got some really, really good players, and they've brought in some players that know this league. And it's about getting that balance, really. And I think they've done that pretty well.
Yeah, I have to say, I don't think any side that's come down in recent history, I think, has been as equipped as Carlisle. You could look last season at Forest Green, but I just think the amount of players that Carlisle have brought in who know this division, what we've often seen with big sides, with big budgets who've come down, they've often relied on players from League Two to actually drop down a division and think that will work. Whereas Carlisle have took a different approach where they're signing well-established top-end National League players. And I think, obviously, you know, likes of Regan Linney clearly stands out. There is probably the marquee signing. But even last season's squad, I know we talk about the gap not being that big, but you look at some of those players, the likes of Luke Armstrong, who can be prolific himself in this division, the likes of Aaron Hayden, if he can stay fit, a player that shouldn't be playing in this division even, and has played in this division in the past. Whelan in the midfield, previously being at Gateshead. It does feel like they've got the foundations and the spine of a team that knows this division like the back of their hand. And I think they're very well equipped to be quite successful this season in this division. But the question with them is, what is their expectation? Is it the title? And that's, for me, as people know, where I just don't think they've got it in them compared to York, who I think are going to finish above them to win the title, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think obviously we'll wait and see how it pans out in terms of the players on paper they've got. They certainly look strong, and it wouldn't surprise me if they did win the title. Look, I mean, I think York will win it, and I think York will win it by some distance. But Carlisle are strong. I don't expect them to lose many games at home, and certainly, as you mentioned, the likes of Regan Linney, the likes of Armstrong, White, etc., they should score a fair few goals as well. So, yeah, they will expect to be up there. It's whereas we've seen teams come down, the likes of, say, Oldham and Rochdale and that have come down and just look to sort of finish mid-table. Mid-table for Carlisle wouldn't be acceptable, really. They'll be expecting to aim higher than that. So,
looking at the four sides as well who've got promoted this season, of course, we've got Truro and Brackley who won the leagues in their respective divisions. And then, of course, Boreham Wood and Scunthorpe got promoted via the playoffs. Out of those four teams, who do you think is best equipped then for the National League this season to be successful?
Yeah, good question. I think in terms of the managers, I mean, you'd certainly look at Truro, probably, with John Askey, the experience. You know, he's been in this division a number of times and done well in this division, won this division before. So certainly in terms of the managers, you'd look at Truro. In terms of the players, I don't think there's a great deal between them. I think you'd probably look at Boreham Wood, maybe. I think they've probably got a little bit more experience and sort of top-end quality in their side. I know obviously they got relegated the year before last, but there's a nucleus of players there that have done well and got in and around the playoffs before in this league. So, yeah, certainly in terms of the manager, Truro, and the players, Boreham Wood. But equally, I don't think you can write off the other two, which is a bit tongue-in-cheek, because I did write off Scunthorpe and put them to go down.
Yeah, I heard about that one.
But yeah, I think Scunthorpe, if they played to how they can, their potential, the likes of Callum Roberts, I know you said that he should be playing in the Football League. And yeah, if they can get him in form, then I think they got a good chance. And I think quite a lot of people are writing Brackley off. I certainly wouldn't be writing them off. I don't think they'll concede many goals. And I think they've recruited pretty well this summer. So, yeah, I think this could feasibly be the first year where we perhaps see all four teams come up and stay up. Because I just think they're all looking fairly strong.
Yeah, of course. Last year, I think all four sides actually managed to survive, didn't they, as well? And I think this year, to be fair, there's a good possibility that all four will stay up. I think the lazy eye will, of course, look at Truro and just go, you look at where they've come from and probably go, oh, yeah, they'll probably struggle this season. For me, I think they've got all the foundations to really kick on and survive. I think I had them 15th, actually, overall, but which could be seen as quite a high prediction. But with John Askey in charge, he knows what's required to survive in this division. I think he's recruited well. I think out of all four sides, I think Truro have actually done the best recruitment. And if you think about it, last season, they actually won the division below. Everyone talks about that gap. But that squad clearly deserves its opportunity in the National League. And I think they've just added to that with quality and quite smart additions as well. And I think going forward, particularly, I think they'll be very strong. And I think particularly in the goalkeeper that they've got as well, I'm pretty impressed that they should be more than fine, in my opinion. Yeah, for me, I think they're probably the ones for me that I think will do the best. In terms of those who may struggle, you wouldn't probably think this, but I think the two that I think will be the closest to the drop will actually be the ones that have previously had history in this National League recently. And of course, that's Scunthorpe and Boreham Wood. I've got them both to survive, but I can't see them, although they've got the experience in this division, particularly Boreham Wood. From what I've seen with the recruitment, they came up through the playoffs. I don't think they've got enough to really fully establish themselves in higher mid-table like I originally thought they would when they initially got promoted via the playoffs. What's your thoughts on those two outfits?
Yeah, I think certainly in those two teams, I would have more confidence in, say, a Boreham Wood, given the experience. They perhaps haven't added as extensively as other teams, but I think they have added a couple of good players here and there. Obviously, added Tom White from Morecambe, who will be a really good midfielder for this level. The likes of Luke Norris as well, who's really experienced striker. And they retained quite well, so I don't think they needed to add too much to their side from last year. Scunthorpe, I think, obviously, they were the lowest of the four that I did in my predictions. I still do have one or two question marks over them. Obviously, they got promoted last year, but I do still have one or two concerns with regards to, say, the manager, Andy Butler, because he's still very, very new to this. And obviously, the goalkeeping position, I think, that's not me forming an opinion of the goalkeepers. Speaking to and reading quite a lot of what Scunthorpe fans were saying during pre-season, I think they were of the consensus that maybe it's a little bit too early, perhaps a year early for Mason Campbell to be a number one, and that potentially there's a question mark there. So, yeah, I think of those two teams, they're the one team that I'd look at and think, yeah, there's one or two weak areas there for me. Whereas Bournemouth, I think, will come up fairly well. And I think I put them lower mid-table in mine. I think they'll be okay.
Concern for me with Boreham Wood is that season they got relegated. There's still quite a lot of that squad still there under Luke Garrard. I've got them to survive just about, because I think the issue probably he had when they actually got relegated is I don't think he'd ever had to deal with being in a relegation battle. And I don't think he'd ever plan for Boreham Wood to be in money, if that makes sense as such, because prior to that season, they were always heading towards the playoffs. And it probably came as a surprise to him that towards the end of the season, they were in the position that they were in. And perhaps that's something for him where he might have had a bit of naivety in that position. However, the respect that you've got to give him for going back to Boreham Wood and getting him promoted first time of asking, for me, I think he has made up for it. And I think he'll have more experience this time around to be able to keep Boreham Wood in the division, I think, overall, because he knows what it takes now. He knows that Boreham Wood probably aren't going to be pushing for the playoffs this season. The initial aim, like it is, I think, with any club that gets promoted, is to stabilise in this division or at least survive in it. And I think that's something that Boreham Wood will probably do. As for Scunthorpe, I know you've mentioned them there. Yeah, they're the club that, in terms of the actual transfer business, I've perhaps been a little bit disappointed with. Last season's squad, I think, probably should have gone on to win the title, I think, overall. And, of course, have done it via the playoffs. You look at some of the individuals. Cal Roberts is obviously the one for me that stands out the most there. But, of course, Danny Whitehall as well going forward. He did very well at Eastleigh too. But you just have thought they might have added to that squad a little bit more than what they have done. And if you look at the additions, the likes of Billy Chadwick, a player that I've always thought there's a player in there, but he's never really got going at any club. Dubameze as well, of course, has come on from Bolton, was on loan at Halifax last season. Seemed okay there, still very raw. I just don't think across the squad they've signed enough established National League players like I thought they might have potentially done. They've gone down the route of maybe taking a few gambles on players. Yeah, what's your thoughts on Scunthorpe? I know you're kind of in the same boat as me with them potentially.
Yeah, I think in terms of the addition that they've made, certainly on paper, I don't think they look as strong as the other teams. Obviously, one of the key reasons as to why they did so well last year, despite all the attacking quality they've got, was the fact that they kept so many clean sheets. And they've lost a couple of players from their back line. Maxime Currigan's gone to Hartlepool. They've lost Michael Kelly, who's obviously gone to Boston. They've lost Ross Fitzsimmons, who's gone to the Football League. So I haven't seen the quality come in that area to maintain the levels of last year. And they're obviously stepping up a division, so you would imagine they'll find it tougher. And whereas they have perhaps taken a gamble on one or two that perhaps aren't the finished article, I don't have the. I think one of the key things which I've said when I'm doing my predictions are about having confidence, and I don't have the confidence in Butler at this moment to make those sort of gambles turn out to be really good players. Whereas I look at, for example, John Askey at Truro, he signed a couple of players who, on paper when they signed, you thought, the likes of Jays Cabio, I don't think anybody was talking about him when he signed. Yeah, Askey's then been able to turn him into a Football League player. So, yeah, whereas Truro, I've got more of a track record of doing that. I haven't seen that with Scunthorpe yet for me.
We're going to take a look at the live chat then, see what people have been saying. Tech God YT is in. He said he's the first one here. Yeah, welcome to the stream. We've had AJ who's come in and said, hello, Luke, evening from Greece. A new season of absolute fun, but sadly Barnet aren't in it this season, but it will be an interesting season. Truro City, first season in the league, I think. And yeah, of course, it is their first season actually competing in the National League. CJ's here and said, evening, folks. Welcome to the stream. We've had Lewis who's come and said, evening all. Welcome, Lewis. We've had Beer Monster, who's of course a channel member as well. He's come in tonight and said, Kendall and Dallas to score the goals. It won't be about not losing a game. It will be front foot to win it. Yeah, that's something that, to be fair, I've had the impression that it's going to be more of the same from Southend, particularly with the same manager and the way they've recruited is they're going to play not to lose as such. However, that's something that Southend fans, I think, have come out and said, that's not how we're going to play this season. We're going to be on the front foot with the players that we've got. And to be fair, the likes of Kendall and particularly Dallas now that he's come in, you've got that going forward. Potentially they will change the way they play to be more dominant in games and not play to lose. Particularly, you think of Kendall last season, he came into form towards the back end of the season. And for me, potentially, I think a lot of people may have maybe quite far off when they're actually having their opinions on Southend as being this side that's not going to play to lose. Of course, a lot of people have got them in the playoffs, but the reason I didn't have them in the top three or in the title race as such is because I don't think they'll win enough games because they're going to play to lose. However, when I've come out and said that, I have received not criticism as such, but a lot of Southend fans have come out and said that's not how we're going to play this season. Yeah, what's your thoughts on that overall?
Yeah, I mean, I perhaps wouldn't agree with they go out to lose. I think, yeah.
It was quite negative, doesn't it? When you say that, it's quite, but I don't see it as negative, me, so I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think at times they were, I wouldn't perhaps use the word negative, I'd say perhaps a little bit pragmatic. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, I hope they go out a little bit more on the front foot because I look at, for example, Kendall and Dallas as a front two, and then you've got Sam Austin in behind, potentially Apire Forson and Chambers Parallon, and then you've got two really flying wing backs in Jack Bridge and Gus Scott Morris. When they turn the ball over, I'd be quite excited as a prospect in terms of two really good strikers, a really good three in midfield, and two good wing backs. So I hope they go for it more in games because I think the quality is there. And I think I said last year was that given they play a back three, it is quite at times a negative back three. Whereas I'd like to see them be a little bit more adventurous going forward because I think the quality's there. It's just the way that they, get the best out of it because as much as the strikers they had last year perhaps didn't score as many goals as Southend fans would like, I'm not convinced that all of those strikers aren't at, a reasonable striker for the level. Just at times they perhaps didn't get the service because they were perhaps a little bit too defensive. So, yeah, I'd like to see them play on the front foot because I think the quality's there.
When I use the term negative, I didn't mean it in terms of how they played. I meant it in terms... How did I mean it? I meant it in terms of when I used the term of saying that they play not to lose overall.
I know what you meant by it in terms of, they looked to perhaps, take a draw as opposed to go and win it with the risk of losing it. So, which I don't think is a bad thing, but because I think certainly there is value in being difficult to beat first and foremost. But whereas you look at, for example, Dorking, who employ a fairly similar system, they wouldn't be playing for a draw; they'd be going out to win. And I'd like to see Southend be a little bit more like that, take a few more risks, get players higher. Because, as I say, I think the quality's there now.
100%. We've had a Hartlepool fan who's come in tonight, and he said, similar situation with Carlisle when Hartlepool got relegated for the first time. They had several promotion winners and title winners players, and we was mid-table. Are they meaning this time that Hartlepool were relegated or previously? That's what I'm trying to say. Because if I remember this time, I don't think I can actually remember last time Hartlepool came down, to be honest. I think I was just starting to really watch Halifax at the time. I think it was like 2015, something like that. But this, I think if you think of this time, if you did mean that, and I apologise if you didn't, for me, I think Carlisle have really splashed the cash compared to how Hartlepool have, if that makes sense. And I think Carlisle overall, off the field, seem to be in a very, very good position. And I think that's something that surprised me, is the fact that they've come down, such a big club, but it feels like the owners are seen as quite good owners by the fans. I think the fans are on board with what they're trying to do there. And potentially it was just maybe that an unfortunate season why they've actually gone down, made a couple of bad decisions, and that's why they've gone down. And we've got to remember they've got Mark Hughes in charge, and he's got so much experience. And I don't even mean him because it's Mark Hughes as a name. I mean, you look at last season, he came in. If he'd have stayed there any longer for another 5 or 6 games, they would have survived. So for me, it does feel like there's a bit of positivity around there towards the back end of the season that surely they're going to try and carry on into this season.
Yeah, I mean, I'd agree with that. I think he came in and yes, he got them he got them relegated. They went down. I think there was certainly some signs, some improvement. They got a couple of results together. And I would back that with a proper summer as he's had this year, time to implement his ideas and a couple of fresh faces that he can obviously get them competitive. I know he's perhaps not managed in this division before, but ultimately that is fairly transferable in terms of if you can build successful sides, then it shouldn't matter the level within reason. So, yeah, I think he will learn 1 or 2 things about himself, no doubt, because, even at his age and his experience, he'll be learning, especially in a new league. But I think he's a fairly safe pair of hands.
John's coming, who's actually a Carlisle United fan. As a Carlisle United fan, it'll be good just to win a few games again. And if we are lucky enough to get promoted, we'll definitely be the stronger for it. Yeah, I think Carlisle coming down, as I've said, they're in a very good position. I just think I look at York and I even look at Rochdale, and they've got projects there, and they're further into this project of being familiar with the division compared to potentially Carlisle, because they've got a quality squad, but they've all got to come together. They're playing in a division, of course, there's players that have played in this division before, but they've not actually played in it yet as a club. I mean, overall, Mark Hughes has never managed in it. For me, it's going to be testing when they're going to somewhere like Wealdstone, they're going to somewhere like Tamworth, and this is no disrespect to those clubs, and they're 2-0 down on a Tuesday night. That's when I think it really hits home with them, where they're at as a club, compared to Rochdale and York, who've probably already had that. And I think the further into their projects, they've got their style now fully set. They know what it takes in this division. They know all the other teams like the back of the hand from last season. Of course, they've changed potentially, but they're still, the foundations are the same, managers and how they like to play. For me, overall, I just look at those two and I just think they're just they're further into their projects, if that makes sense. And that's why I think they're in better positions. I don't know what your take is on that.
Yeah, I mean, I'd agree that they're perhaps further ahead. York have obviously had a couple of years to build, and then obviously Rochdale likewise under McNulty. So yeah, I suppose the question is whilst the likes of say Rochdale are a couple of years into their project, are they perhaps coming into it with a lower ceiling or lower foundation to build on than, say, Carlisle? And are they, perhaps further ahead because of the quality they've got? But yeah, I think we'll learn fairly quickly where Carlisle are at. Obviously, it looks great on paper, and I think we'll find out pretty quickly as to whether this team has got it within it to go and get success this year.
It's not an easy start for them. Of course, we're going to be coming on to that shortly, going away to work, and of course, new investment there, quite high expectations there for them themselves to be looking to potentially sneak into the playoffs this season, and particularly at home last season, working towards the end became a really difficult place to go, and they'll certainly try and stop Carlisle from playing the football that I'd expect they'd like to play. Chris Stringer's come in and said, good evening from the EFL. Of course, that's an Oldham fan. We've had Alfie, who's come in tonight, and said, good evening, lads. Of course, he's a Yeovil fan. He said, you could say that Southend play to go down and come back from that. Yes, they were the comeback kings, to be fair, last season. Unfortunately, I think they just run out of firepower in that playoff final to not come back. Evening, guys. Luke is there. Plan to get Mark White on the channel again. There's always a plan to get him on the channel. Let's put it that way. I'm sure we're going to sort something out at some point, but I'll have to think of a reason to bring him on. But to be fair, you don't even need a reason to bring Mark White on because he can talk for England, to be fair. And then we've had Luke. What do you think of the Morecambe in the last couple of weeks? I've spoke about it. I've seen it all over social media. There isn't particularly much I can say because I think everyone probably knows me from what I've said in the past about other clubs, my entire thoughts on it. And I'm guessing, Joe, yourself, your thoughts on it. There's not much I can do to make a difference when I'm saying this now, and that's why I'm not particularly going overboard and I want to talk about because it's such a negative thing to talk about. I will say this, though. I just think overall, I think it's despicable how this keeps happening with football clubs. Bury, Macclesfield, you look at Halifax, look at Aldershot. The list goes on of clubs that have gone out of existence, Rushden and Diamonds. And I just think I'm surprised, and I think it's quite shocking that we're in 2025 and this hasn't been resolved yet, where things have come into place to be able to resolve these issues. Because it's clear and simple. Everyone knows Morecambe have got an owner who doesn't want to sell and isn't putting money into the club. And if you don't put money into the club or sell the club, then they're going to go out of existence. Something needs to be in place overall where he's forced to sell the club or the club gets taken off him and given to new owners who have the best interest of the club, because there are clearly people there that are looking to purchase the club, but there's a barrier there, and the Morecambe owner is unwilling to sell. And like I said, there's not much more I can say. I think for me overall, I don't think it cares who you support as a fan. You never want to see this happen to any other club if you're a true football fan. You'll have rival clubs who'll say, "Oh, we'll be laughing at it," but inside, I reckon they'll be devastated when they go out of existence because they won't have a derby. And I just think for me overall, there's not much more I can say. All I will say is what I don't understand is someone like Sheffield Wednesday, someone like Bolton, particularly Bolton, where it's happened now. When Bolton and Bury were in this position, Bury went out of existence. Bolton were fine. No one could ever have seen Bolton going out of existence. There's a reason. Why is it the small clubs that this is happening to? Look at Reading. They didn't go out of existence. Sheffield Wednesday, let's be honest, it is tough there. And I hope that gets resolved as well. But they're not going to go out of existence, I don't think. So why is it happening to a small club like Morecambe overall? And that's a question potentially to you. Why are the small clubs being allowed to go out of existence and no one stepping in and stopping this from happening?
Yeah, it's a good question. I suppose we can't really add too much more on the Morecambe situation, because I feel we are going a little bit round in circles. Obviously, dreadful situation. I suppose you use that term, sort of the smaller clubs, that potentially there just isn't the interest from an owner taking over. Yes, we know obviously Punjab Warriors have tabled an offer. The likes of a Sheffield Wednesday or a Bolton, that they potentially get higher interest and lots more parties because of that potential there. in them. So yeah, it's ideally you would like to think that every football club's attractive, and that there's always a way that you can save football clubs. And yeah, I mean it's gotta happen, because we're seeing too many of these clubs that go against the wall. Obviously, the likes of Southend that were going through the ringer, and obviously they're out the other side of it. Hopefully Morecambe can do the same.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's not looking likely at the moment. Of course, just for those who aren't aware, I'm sure everyone will be watching this. They are suspended from participating in the National League for the first 3 games. I think if they are to participate in it at this stage, there will likely be significant points deductions. For me, all I want at this stage now is just to allow them to participate in the division, or just give them that football club, because fortunately for me, I wasn't around when Halifax went out of existence. The year they actually reformed was the year I think I was about 1 at the time. So, of course, I didn't have any interest in football at that time. But I've never had to feel that. And if you took that away from me now, I don't know what I would do with myself on a Saturday, because there'd be no other club that you can have that same attachment to, because once you've fallen in love with your club, there's no going back. And yeah, for me overall, I just fear for every Morecambe fan out there, because they won't know what to do with themselves at the moment. There's nothing they can do, and it is down to one extremely selfish individual why they're currently in this position. But you say that there's loads of selfish individuals out there. What I'm more frustrated with is the fact that people aren't stepping in, who've probably got more educated on it than me, aren't stepping in and being able to stop the situation from happening. Anyway, we'll move on from that, because it's quite a deep conversation. It's quite a negative one as well overall, and we'll try keep it positive with the National League. I say keep it positive. I've got 5 questions before we actually get on to doing the actual predictions. The first question is very, very fairly negative as well. Who's the first manager for you to be sacked this season?
Yeah, we've got a prediction running on NL Full Time, which we did in our previews, and I think, I mean, obviously it's not nice to predict any manager to go, but I think I went with Kelvin Davis at Eastleigh. I think the squad that they've got on paper should be a top 5 squad for me, and I think they underachieved last year, and given that they already added to what was a pretty good squad last year, they should be aiming even higher this year. So, and Stuart Donald as owner, I think they'll be pretty impatient. They'll want success because they've backed the managers really well. So if they see that not being rewarded on the pitch, I think they'll be pretty quick to make a change. So I would probably go for Kelvin Davis.
I think another manager who I think will be down there as well. If you've got 3, I think there'll be one of these will be the other one. I've got Solihull Moors as manager. Of course, Matt Taylor. Awful end to the season last season. The thing that's in his favour, and I think that's kept him in the job, is the fact that I think he probably did enough to keep Solihull Moors up with those last couple of wins towards the end of the season. And now they've given him a full summer, and they've fully backed him. Like Eastleigh, I think financially they've been backed with the players that he's brought in. I think they're his players as well, that he's wanted as well at Solihull. But I just really don't rate him as a manager, and I just don't think he'll get the best out of that squad from what he did last season. So for me, overall, I think he's someone who's going to be in, under pressure after the first game, to be honest. If they lose tomorrow, I think fans will be turning on him immediately, because I think the Solihull Moor fan base is already very thin with what they can actually take still now, to be honest, overall. However, of course, he has had a full summer, and I suppose you have to look at it like it's a clean slate now for them. He's had a full summer, it's his own players, but this time around, there's simply no excuses. And if they're 5 or 6 games in and they're not in a good position, then I think he will be out of the door. Yeah, I can understand your take on Eastleigh's manager, because I think it is a similar situation overall as well with the money they've had. It does feel like if they got a good manager there, and I'm not particularly sold on Davis overall, I think they probably do have the potential to be pushing for the playoffs. Of course, losing Tyrese Shade though. But yeah, is that another one with Solihull's manager, one for you that were kind of in the hat, I suppose?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I agree with Paul. That's obviously on here usually, in terms of, there's no bias in it. It's just from what you've seen of Matt Taylor as a manager, who was obviously at Shrewsbury, at Walsall, at Wealdstone, and then obviously at Solihull Moors. There's certainly nothing really that you can hang your hat on in terms of, that's done really well, or that he's got the acumen to be a manager at this level. And Solihull Moors have got one of the best owners in the league in terms of Darrell Eales. So I don't imagine that if they are in trouble, he'll be waiting too long to press the trigger and make a change to ensure that they remain a National League team.
Who's going to be your top goal scorer then come the end of the season?
Yeah, tough one. I did actually pick Ollie Pearce in my predictions with NL full time, so I'd have to go with him. And I actually did our predictions on the Absolute Football Pod, where everybody had picked Ollie Pearce, so I did chuck another name in there, who I don't like to use the phrase being slept on, but I think he's not been talked about a great deal. And I would have to throw Ollie Lynch in there. At Tamworth. I think he was fantastic last year for Hemel Hempstead. I think Tamworth have done really well to get him, and I can see him doing just as well as Dan Creaney did last year. So, if I was to throw a rogue name out there for you, then it would be Ollie Lynch.
Outside one. I think for me, when it comes to the outsiders, I don't even know if you class this as one because I think he was third last season. Manny Disruwe at Rochdale, I think, could be up there. Just for everyone that knows, Ollie Pearce is mine as well. I can't see past it, but I think Disruwe will be up there because one thing that he is the main man. He will be the main source of goals up top for Rochdale, I think, overall. Then again, Devante Rodney as well there. And I think how you've got to look at it when you're looking at a top goal scorer, it's not just the quality of the striker. It's not even just the quality behind them. It's if they've got other players who are going to come in with the goals, because that'll take chances away from yourself overall. And potentially, I think you're in a better position overall in certain situations when, as a team, overall the goals are actually spread out because you're not as predictable overall when you're relying on one player. I think when I say that, I look at Scunthorpe. I think for goals, they're going to be reliant on Carl Roberts, Danny Whitehall potentially as well. And teams will just be looking to stop Carl Roberts. And I think if they stop Carl Roberts, I think they will stop Scunthorpe overall, if I'm being honest. Whereas I look at Rochdale and I just think there's a number of different players who could potentially score. The likes of Alarakia, the likes of Devante Rodney, the likes of course, Disruwe as well. But I wouldn't count against him scoring a good number of goals. Ollie Pearce, I just think with the amount of chances that he's going to be gifted by those players, I just can't see past him. I don't think he's going to let up any more than what he did last season with the goals that he scored. But of course, you never know because you just never know with injuries and things like that can come into place as well. Overall, I'm trying to think if there's any more now that you could potentially shout about who could be outside shots for who could be the top goal scorer. But Andrew Dallas, I don't think he'll get the chances, to be honest, that Pearce would get, to be honest, overall.
Yeah, I mean, the only other name that I probably would chuck into it, who bit of a rogue shout really, is Christian Deutsch. Only because you look at the fact that, you mentioned about the number of chances. I mean, he's going to have two of the best players in the league in Carl McAllister and Nick Horton feeding him chances. So if he's the main man for them, whoever the main man is for Forest Green up front, I think that they'll score a fairly high number of goals, be it Deutsch, be it Cardwell, be it Cairo Mitchell. So, I think whoever in that system is the number 9, I think will get fairly good opportunities to score.
Shock team then this season overall. Of course, you'll probably look back to your predictions now and think maybe the one where you got the most stick for putting them high. Who was the one for you then?
Good question. I didn't really have any shock ones. I think maybe you could say Sutton, who I had in my playoffs. I think they've added really, really well. And I think they'll be fairly close to the playoffs. I think potentially Halifax.
You had them 13th, didn't you?
Yeah, and I did have them mid-table. because I'm a little bit cautious. Obviously, given that they've lost a number of key players again, they've obviously lost, in my opinion. I know he wasn't always flavour of the month at Halifax, but in my opinion, he was probably one of the top 5 managers, Chris Millington, in the league. I think he did an excellent job. So, but I like Adam Maitland. I think he's a really good young manager. Did really well at Kings Lynn, and potentially, I think if they can start well, I think they can potentially creep into that playoff picture. Even though I did have them mid-table, I think it's mid-table with conservative push to potentially get into that top 7, because I think, yes, they've gone with a number of young players, but I think it could gel quite nicely. I'm really looking forward to seeing how Cody Johnson does in midfield.
He looks good in pre-season.
So, that would be my pick, probably.
I think for me, if I look back, Truro maybe is 15th, but then again, I don't. Would that be classed as a massive one? 15th, when most people have them probably just to survive or just to go down. I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I think probably I might get a bit of stick for saying it, but I think as a surprised package, I think Yeovil maybe. Not many people have talked about them, but I maintain that they've got a really good defence. Probably, certainly 2 of the best centre backs in the league, in Morgan Williams and Jake Wannell. And I think they've got 2 strikers there at least, Aaron Jarvis and Harvey Greenslade, who can both get double figures. And I know he's not that universally popular, but I think Mark Cooper's a good manager. He's ruthless, but good managers are ruthless. And
got out this league before.
He's got promoted from this league before. And unfortunately, you don't get promotions in this league unless you know something and you're pretty good. So you don't just stumble on promotion. So, I think potentially them. I could see them getting off to a good start. And they need to get off to a good start, obviously, with new ownership and obviously 1 or 2 murmurings during the summer. But in terms of a team that I think has got a pretty decent core to their team, probably Yeovil.
I 100% agree on that. I had them 9th, but I was tempted to put them higher. I think 9th, 8th, and 7th. I could have put them in any order. We're really struggling with who I were going to pick. For me, Yeovil, you've mentioned they're defensively quite strong last season overall, and they've identified the positions that they need to, invest in, and they have done. I think in the summer, Tavon Campbell, he's another striker. I know he's a little. You either love him or you hate him. He's a bit like Marmite, but I think overall for me, if you can get the best out of him, which I think Yeovil potentially could do, I think they were missing that kind of target man last season. I don't think Newblay really stepped up, and I think Tavon Campbell is capable of doing. He can get into double digits as well. You've mentioned the 2 strikers that you've got, the likes of Jarvis, who you've mentioned as well, probably one of the bright sparks last season, and he's just been supported with with the attack as well. He signed Daly as well, I think, who came in, I believe, in the attacking midfield position. For me, overall, I just think the foundations are there for Yeovil overall, and they are a bit of an outside shot for me to be really successful this season. I think as well, another side that potentially could be seen as the shock for me, who I've put in the top 7, he's probably working, but Neil Ardley as a manager, I rate him very highly. I thought they seem to have something good going there, and although potentially on paper they haven't recruited heavily in the summer, I don't necessarily think they needed to. I thought they were onto a good thing towards the back end of last season with that squad as a whole. And I think all they've done overall is make 1 or 2 cute additions. And as a team, they've got that identity about them. It's going to be really hard to break down a really industrial and physical side that can actually play a bit of football as well. And for me, overall, I look at Woking and I think they're going to be a really difficult side for teams to play against. And that's why I might have them just to sneak inside the playoffs this season. Next one then that I've got for you, I've got the biggest underachievers then this season.
I think I'd probably have to go Eastleigh. As I say, I maintain that their squad is top 5, and I probably don't think I haven't put them to get top 5, and I actually haven't put them to get in the playoffs. So, I think they are a really, really good squad on paper, I think they'll fall short of where that squad should be. In terms of another team, potentially, I'm undecided on at the moment. I have to say is probably Altrincham. I think there's potential there for it to go well, but equally, I think there's potential there for it to go a little bit flat, like it did last year. Obviously, losing Regan Linney, losing Alex Newby. They've brought in a couple of players, one or two that I like, one or two that I have question marks on. I like Phil Parkinson, but I think they will be hoping to get in the playoffs, and equally, I've put them to fall short of that. So,
yeah, that's the thing for me. I don't understand really their expectation. You'd think as a club, the kind of areas that they've been around the last couple of two or three seasons has been, of course, the playoffs. One of them, they finished in them, and this season, I think you'd like to think they'll be going for that. But would you say they're stronger than they were last season? For me, overall, no. I think it's always hard, isn't it, when you're replacing the likes of Newby and Linney, you're taking away his goals. But I think as a squad overall, you've got to be better with other players as a squad, with the players that I don't think you can just get, basically, you can get two individuals to come in and replace those, because it's too much of a gamble, and it's highly likely, unless you've got loads of money, you're not going to be able to bring in two players that are going to match those goals. However, there as a team overall with your recruitment, you've got to build a team that can produce more than what they did last season. And for me, there's one or two signings I like you as well. The lad from Boston, they got Ward, I think, a good player for them. But I just don't think there's enough there for me where I look at them as a side overall compared to those above them and think, yeah, they're going to be pushing for the playoffs this season. So potentially Altrincham, potentially, I'm trying to think of another one when I've looked back to my predictions now. I think Eastleigh had about 12. I think with the squad, that would probably be underachieving. Yeah. I had them in the playoffs, and I want to read out this comment because I think this kind of goes with what I'm about to say. Hartlepool is one where I could see them with that squad underachieving this season if this comes off like he's mentioned. He's actually read out with the dictatorship of Raj. I would put money on Simon Grayson out of a job by November. We've sacked managers in the past who have been a handful of points outside the playoffs. And this is a point here for me overall where it was very hard to predict well Hartlepool finish. I actually had them to finish inside the playoffs. Yet I could easily see them being pondering around the relegation zone, if that makes sense, which seems quite extreme when you think of the differences between the two placements. But as a squad, I think the top seven, with the ownership and the way they run, they're one of the worst run clubs in this division as a whole overall. In terms of off the field, recruitment-wise, I think every season I like the recruitment, but they just don't seem to get the best out of the squad. And for me overall, you might put it down to the manager, but I think you have to look at things going off the field that's clearly having an effect on the players too. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I can potentially. I think I have enough faith in the recruitment that they've done this summer for them to be in and around it. And I'm not gonna tell Hartlepool fans how to feel. Obviously, they know their club far better than me, but to me, I've had that argument put to me this summer that potentially there could be one or two problems for, Raj, etc. But I don't see that as a reason, because I think if he is going to sell the club, it's in his interest to make sure that the football team is as good as it can be so that he gets a better offer when he sells the club. For me, I think it's in his interest to make sure that Hartlepool, if he is going to sell the club, that Hartlepool are the best version on the pitch as they can be. So I personally don't think that there'll be that change.
Someone's coming in about Daniel Naquam. I actually know him from his time at Halifax at the back end of last season. And I quite liked him. I thought it was more of a midfielder than a striker, but he said, is this the striker who's joined Wealdstone, played well for Hartlepool in pre-season? He was released by Middlesbrough. Yeah, of course, he went to Hartlepool on trial in pre-season. At Halifax, I wouldn't have minded us taking a chance on him because I like the look of him the back end of last season. I didn't see him as much of a goal scorer, though. I thought it was more of an attacking midfielder or even a central midfielder, but we seem to play him up top overall, but seems to be quite a handful. I do like the look of that addition for Wealdstone. It does seem very Wealdstone when I think of that type of physical outfit overall, but I just can't see him being prolific for them. So I think they're going to have to rely on other players potentially to score the goals. Final biggest underachievers for me who I had down there overall. Probably Solihull, maybe. I think with the squad, I could see them underachieving. I think that had them about 13th, and I think as a club they should be looking to aim for the playoffs. Anyone else? That's probably about it. I think each club as well, when you're down there, for example, Boreham would finish in 20th, which I had them to. I think as a fan base, they'd say that's an underachievement for them. I think having Scunthorpe about 18th will be an underachievement for them overall. But I won't be shocked if that makes sense, if they win the positions that they're in. But I think overall, Joe, we're probably at a point now where we can actually get on to doing the predictions. Of course, before we do this, the podcast is sponsored by Cards Accepted. If you use the link in the description, you'll get 50% off your card machine. No contracts or monthly fees. From next week, I'm hoping to put a barcode on the screen so you can actually just use your phone to get straight onto their site, and you will get a discount if you use that barcode as well overall. But in terms of the Predictions League, as it's a new season, it's a good opportunity for everyone to start now, for those who are watching, or even those who are watching afterwards, which is the majority of people, to actually play along. Now, I'm going to talk you through the rules. Well, I would, but I thought it'd be easier to put a video up. Now, the Predictions League is sponsored by Paul's company, PTS Travel, which is a travel company. If you want to go abroad throughout the season, then that is the place to go. And yeah, that's probably enough of me waffling. I'll put a video up now, and you will actually know how to play along. Hopefully I've described it well. So hopefully that makes sense to everyone on how to actually play along. I'll put that on each week as well for those who are not with us tonight, so you can actually know how to play along as well. But yeah, we're probably going to get more or less straight into it. Put your predictions in the live chat. We will try and put them on screen if we do get enough. But starting things off, we've got Altrincham versus Aldershot. Altrincham, of course, fell short of missing out of the playoffs last season. Aldershot coming into this season after just winning the FA Trophy, of course, in the league themselves, lower mid-table for them last season. How do you see this fixture going then overall for you, Joe?
Yeah, I think there'll be goals in it. I think with Aldershot, you can always guarantee goals at both ends. And I think Aldershot will be looking to get off to a pretty good start, given the momentum of last year, the way that they ended the season. I would probably have to go for 2-2. I think both teams have their weaknesses defensively, but equally have both strengthened up top. So, yeah, I'll go for 2-2.
I actually disagree with you. I've gone for a draw myself, but I disagree with your thoughts on it being quite high scoring. Of course, Aldershot known to score goals, but I look at Altrincham going forward, and I'm not particularly sold on them with the losses that they've got. I can't see this being a high scoring one for me. I'm actually going to go for a 1-1 draw for the first game of the season. I expect these to be very close to each other in the league come the end of the season as well. I look at Altrincham overall, and I think best bet I think will be mid-table, and I think it'll be similar with Aldershot overall. So I've gone for 1-1, and you've gone for 2-2. Put your predictions in the live chat, everyone. We have someone coming here, and they've actually gone for a 2-0 Aldershot win. We've had a 1-1 draw as well that's coming from Alfie. We've also had the Hortons who's coming, who's a York fan. He said even in York to win the league with Southend to win the playoffs, Carlisle would be expected to go up, but clubs coming down rarely go up in the first season down. Yeah, I agree with you on your thoughts there. Well, on Carlisle probably not getting off to as good start as certain people may expect, just based on the history of how sides have done. We'll go on to the next fixture now, if I can actually get it up here. Which will actually be It was a lot easier last year. I think they've kind of changed the format to this, which doesn't help at this time, but I'll get used to it at some point. The next fixture is, when it loads, Boreham Wood versus Rochdale. Newly promoted Boreham Wood coming up against a Rochdale side who have got quite high expectations this season to do well. How do you see this one going overall?
Yeah, really good game, this one. I think Rochdale, if they're going to be a little bit more towards crosses this season with Uwe, I think that potentially could fall into Bournemouth's hands. They are fairly defensively strong, fairly good at defending their own box. And yeah, I mean, we don't always see the best version of teams at this point. I think in terms of the players that are coming, I think Rochdale have probably made the more changes to their team during the summer. So potentially, I think they may take a little bit longer to get going. So I'm going to go a bit rogue. I'm going to go 1-0 to Bournemouth.
Surprising that. I've actually gone for a Rochdale win. I think from Bournemouth, it'll be more of the same with them from when they were last in the division. I think they're going to be a really hard team to break down. I expect Rochdale to be able to keep a lot of the ball. And it's just a question of being able to break them down. I think this season, with the quality they've got out wide for 90 minutes, if the game goes how I expect Rochdale to have the ability to be able to break Boreham Wood down eventually. I think it'll be a really tight and scrappy game. I don't think it'll be the best reflection of Rochdale overall coming away from this, but I expect them to narrowly win 1-0. I just think when you look at that forward line going forward, first game of the season, high expectation, I just think going forward, they'll be able to eventually break them down. And I'm going to go for a 1-0 Rochdale win away from home. Moving on to the next fixture then, if it comes up, we have got, this might be easier actually, we've got it here now. We've got Brackley versus Eastleigh, and another newly promoted National League side, who of course won the National League North last season. They're coming up against an Eastleigh side who've, of course, themselves invested quite heavily in the summer, whilst also losing one or two key players, the likes of Tyrese Shade. How do you see this one going then, Joe, overall?
Yeah, I think Brackley will get off to a pretty good start. I think it'll be rocking inside Brackley Stadium. Obviously, they've waited so long to get up, and now they've finally got that chance. I think there'll be a decent crowd in there, bumper crowd. And yeah, certainly if Eastleigh are going to look to go long into Paul McCallum, I think that will play into Brackley's hands. And I'm actually going to go with the same scoreline that just popped up on the screen. I'm going to go with 2-0 to Brackley.
I'm going 3-1 to Brackley. It's been a highly anticipated game, this for Brackley, for a long time now. Of course, the previous 7 years, they've been in the playoffs in the National League. Well, not including last year because they actually won the division, but they've been in the top 7, I should say, in the previous 7 years. Yeah, they've been waiting for this. I think they've got the foundations to be able to comfortably stabilise in this division overall with what they've got there. I like the look of them defensively. I think they've got a quality goalkeeper. I think going forward as well, there's individuals in that side that can score goals, and I think a lot of people are kind of losing that. The likes of Connor Hall as well, previously being at Chorley, he's a goal scorer, and I think he'll be able to step up to this division for me overall. And I think for this game, Eastleigh still coming together as a team, like you mentioned with Rochdale, a lot of newcomers there. You've mentioned about them highly relying on McCallum. I think with Tyrese Shade leaving, it could potentially benefit McCallum because he is now the main man once again, but it could also put more additional pressure on him. And if anything from last season's got anything to say of it, maybe potentially he's not as prolific as he once was. And for me, I just feel Brackley, the momentum is with them after gaining promotion. It's a really tight pitch. They'll stop Eastleigh from playing. I think Brackley will be able to win this game 3-1 for me overall. Yeah, I think we both think Brackley will do quite well this season overall. I had them, I think, 18th, 19th, and I was kind of looking to put them higher. But what's your thoughts on them overall, particularly after this fixture?
Yeah, I think they'll stay up this year. I think fairly bullish in that. I think that they've retained well and they've added well, and they don't concede many goals. And I think as a basis, that's a pretty decent basis to build from to get results at this level. So,
Yep, moving on to the next fixture then now. We have got, if it comes up, we'll move on to that one in a bit. We've got my side, Halifax, coming up against Braintree. Firstly, before we predict the game, when you're looking at the two sides this season, and then going into your prediction, I'm sure it'll lead into what you're thinking overall.
How much do I want to be invited back, I suppose? I think Braintree probably need to be fairly strong at home this season. I don't think they'll win many points on the road. And obviously Halifax new manager might take a little bit of time to adjust. I think Braintree will want to get off to a good start. I think there's been a lot of talk about them this year, potentially struggling. I think they'd like to try and bat away those critics early on. So I'm unfortunately, Luke, I'm going to go 1-0 to Braintree.
I wasn't expecting that, to be fair, to be honest. I've gone for a completely different result, which is good for the predictions league. There's probably going to be a bit of a gap, I suspect, after some of these predictions. I've gone for a 3-0 Halifax win. People are saying biased, but if you've seen me on this podcast the past couple of years, I do predict Halifax to win at times, but I'm not always backing them to win. I'm trying not to be biased, but I suppose I look like it in this case. But I'm going to justify myself anyway. Braintree, if you saw my predictions, I'm not particularly sold on them this season. You look at last summer and the amount of players that they brought in, I think that's clearly had an effect on the way they've been able to recruit this summer. Because for me, I look at them and I think because of the money they spent, there were a lot of questions about, yes, the recruitment's good, but have they overspent? And I think that's the case. And this season, you look at their recruitment and they're not signing well-established National League players like they did last season. They've got an extremely thin squad as well. I think they've got a 16-man squad overall this season. It might have been put up a little bit now because they might have signed one or two players in the last day or so. But if you look at the starting 11, I'm not particularly sold on it. But if you look at the lack of depth, that is my major concern for me overall with Braintree. I'm really concerned for them. It will probably one of my more certain predictions for them to actually go down this season. I didn't take that much thought to put them in the bottom 4 or 3 or whatever it'll be. And I look at Halifax on the other side. You look at their pre-season, unbeaten. I know people say you can't read much into pre-season, and I'm a massive advocate for that. I don't think you can read that much into it. But when I've actually gone to the games, I like the look of the side. I like the look of the signings. I think we've got a good spine of a team there, the likes of Hobson defensively, that experience. A really good goalkeeper. I think defensively will be solid again this season. And I think going forward, I think we're a bit of an unknown quantity this season. And I can see us doing quite well once again. And I think we'll be scoring a lot more goals than what we potentially previously have under Chris Millington, while still remaining quite strong defensively. And for me, this game, I think Braintree, they're down at the moment. There's a lack of depth there. There's certainly a lack of quality for me. I don't see them offering much going forward, and I think we'll be fine defensively. So I think we'll comfortably win this game 3-0. And I am really excited, more than I've been in a long time for a season. I thought last season, yes, I thought we'd be in a good position to put a case for the playoffs once again under Millington. But in terms of the actual football on show, I have the impression that we may be scoring more goals this season. I just hope that it don't have a detrimental effect on our defence if we're more open. But the likes of Hobson defensively, the likes of Johnson in goal, the likes of Adettori from last season, I think we're going to be fine. And you look at the losses, Galvin, wing-back, going forward offers much, but defensively was potentially a little risky at times. Evans, senior, big losses, but we're known to be able to replace them. And I think we'll be able to do once again this season with the additions we've made. So I think we'll go into this game and I'm really confident that we can win this, because Braintree are the one side for me that I could see being a little bit like Ebbsfleet of last season overall. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think certainly overall, I think Halifax will do better this season. I equally expected Braintree to struggle, pretty much same as you. But in terms of this game alone, I think Braintree will want to get off to a good start. As I say, because I think home form is going to be so important for them.
100%. Moving on to the next fixture then, we will have a look at will be... I have to go up. I didn't even need to get this up this week, to be honest, because the table's just not even started yet, and that's usually the main aim for it. But the next game that we will have a look at is actually, I think, Southend versus Gateshead. People have probably heard my opinions on Gateshead this season. They always seem to be a side that slips through the net, and I'm concerned for Gateshead this season. Southend, I think it'll be more of the same from last season. I think going forward, they've added quality in the likes of Dallas. I think players will improve like they were doing towards the back end of last season with Kendall coming into form. Hoppers, I believe, is still there. And I just think as a squad, they've got a really good core of a squad, and they've only added to that with 3 or 4 major additions that I think will actually just strengthen them. And I think they've actually been strategic in the fact they've not gone out and just splashed the cash like they potentially could, I think, with the owners. They've been strategic, it's data-driven. And for me, overall, I can see these additions only being a success and continuing on building on what they had last season and going once again. As for Gateshead, number of key players left. Yes, they've looked to replace them. There's been a budget cut there overall, and they've probably had to take 1 or 2 gambles on additions. Particularly, you look at Telford and Chapman coming in. On paper, probably look like good additions. Fringe players at Barnet, very injury prone as well. I've always said this, you could have Lionel Messi signed for you. If he's injured all season, there's no point in having him. And I think that could be the case with the likes of Telford and Chapman overall. And for me, I've just got a bad feeling about Gateshead. The manager, Alan Armstrong, not really managed in this division before, could be seen as the cheap option. Yes, with Gateshead, they're one of those sides that often prove a lot wrong. And I always get frustrated when people predict Halifax down there and we prove them wrong. And I'm sure Gateshead fans will be looking at me and be like, we won't finish down there. But with what I've seen of them, the squad they've got now, for me, they're a side that I could see really struggling. And I think Southend are in a completely different direction. So I think Southend will go here and win 2-0. How do you see it going?
Yeah, I think Southend will want to get off to a pretty good start, given that they fell short at the end last year. I think Alan Armstrong's got 1 or 2 things to prove. And yeah, I mean, it's always they couldn't ask for a longer trip to start, could they really, Southend? No. So I'm going to go 1-1.
Fair enough then. Moving on to the next fixture we will have a look at. I think it will be, get it up here, Solihull Moors versus Robbie Savage's Forest Green Rovers. Mixed opinions, I think, overall, with Robbie Savage being the new manager of Forest Green. What I expect from them, I expect them to try dominate games more than what they did last season. The question is, will it be as effective in terms of results? For me, over time, it will. But I think it's going to take time for this philosophy to really settle in with them overall, because there's a lot of last season's squad still there who are going to have to adjust to Robbie Savage's new style, which may benefit them more overall. The additions have made the likes of Nick Horton. How's he going to adjust from being the main centrepiece to being still a key player, but being with other individuals that are star players as well, the likes of Carl McAllister, the likes of McCann as well? How's he going to deal with being probably not by far the best player like he was at Fylde? I think they're going to score a lot of goals for us, Green Rovers, but unlike last season, I think defensively they may be a lot weaker in terms of the way they play. As for Solihull, I think they've got a lot of quality going forward. A lot of pressure is going to be on Matt Taylor, and he'll be looking to impress in this first game. And I think this will be quite an entertaining one. I've actually gone for a 2-2 draw. How do you see it going?
Yeah, I'm pretty expectant that Forest Green will come out pretty quickly. I think given the quality they've got going forward, as you say, I think they'll score quite a few goals. I do have 1 or 2 question marks over Solihull. And I'm going to go for Robbie Savage to actually get off to a winning start and go 3-2.
What's your actual thoughts on Robbie Savage then coming as a manager? Because it has had mixed opinions overall. For me, at first, I'll be like, when I looked at the recruitment, I thought Kyle Mitchell's signing was a bit of a weird one because I don't particularly rate him that highly. And I thought for a side like Forest Green with the budget they've got, they may have looked to sign other players. But then they've signed Nick Horton. They've kept last season's squad that finished third. For me, he's kind of growing on me where I think they might actually do okay this season. I think I've had them fifth, which I think would be a good position for me. I think overall with them, some may be disappointed. Yeah, what's your opinions on Robbie Savage then as the manager there?
Yeah, I think obviously did a decent job last year at Macclesfield. I think it's perhaps a little bit hard to judge given that they did have an advantage last season. I think if there's any team that he was going to take over in this league, I think probably Forest Green is that team. A little bit unorthodox, but also got really, really big backing like he had relatively at Macclesfield last year. I'm expecting a very different style. I'm expecting very attacking football, or try to be anyway. I am a little bit surprised at the Nick Horton signing. I know he's obviously a very good player, did well last year, but in terms of Robbie Savage come out and saying during pre-season and when he was appointed that he wants really quick, powerful, aggressive front foot football, that doesn't align with Nick Horton. He's a very, very talented player and on his day can be a match winner. But when I think power, pace, that's not Nick Horton. I think really good technical player. So I think it's all about how they can get it to gel. Because on paper, they got lots of names, but it's about getting it to gel on paper.
100%. Looking at the next fixture then, it is, of course, Tamworth versus newly promoted Scunthorpe United. Tamworth was certainly the biggest overachievers of last season, finishing, I believe, in, was it 8th place overall for them. It's not going to get any easier for them. I think they're aware of that. As for Scunthorpe, newly promoted, another side I've got mixed opinions about. I think they'll survive, but I don't think this is particularly the sort of start that I think the Scunthorpe would have wanted. I think they would have wanted a game at home, not away to someone like Tamworth that is, a very difficult place to go like it was last season. And I still think this season, although I've had them to finish a lot lower, I still expect them at home to be particularly strong. And for me, for this one, I think Tamworth will actually win this game 2-0. I think the likes of Cal Roberts won't be able to shine in this type of game because I think they'll just man-mark him out of the game. And this is going to be the issue, I think, with Scunthorpe overall, is I think they are going to be very reliant on him. And I don't think as a team overall, there's other individuals that are really going to step up. And I think Tamworth will just be able to man-mark him out of the game and probably dominate in a way on home soil. And I expect them to win 2-0 in this one. It's not the sort of fixture I think Scunthorpe would want on the opening game week. How do you see this one going?
Yeah, I think it's going to be our first agreement on the scoreline. I'm going to go 2-0 Tamworth. I think, without being too harsh, I think Scunthorpe fans, they expect to step up well. And I think it's one of those games where potentially they may get one or two home truths. They come into it really bullish, expecting to start well. And I think they might get a bit of a rude awakening, as quite a lot of teams did last year against Andy Peakes' side. They're a really, really good side, Tamworth. Perhaps don't get the credit that they deserve. So, yeah, I think 2-0 Tamworth, and I think it'd be fairly comfortable as well.
Moving on to the next fixture then that we will take a look at. It will actually be, I believe it will be Wealdstone versus Truro. Wealdstone aside, that I don't think anyone's really got much expectation for this season. Everyone bar Paul, who's my co-host, he's a Wealdstone fan, I think has had them in the bottom 3 or 4. They're coming up against the newly promoted Truro that certainly going to have a lot of momentum themselves. After winning the title last season, I think they've invested well in the summer. I think they've got a quality manager. And for me, overall, going away to Wealdstone, I could see them winning this game. And I'm actually going to go for a 2-1 Truro win overall. Like I've said, I think they've got goals. I think they've got that ability to grind out results. And I think unlike Wealdstone's manager in Cox, I think Askey's got experience in this division and will know what it takes to survive. And I just fear for Wealdstone, not just in terms of the quality on the field, the lack of experience with the manager. And of course, that might come back to bite me. If he sees this, it'll give him that additional motivation, I think, to prove everyone wrong. But 34 years of age, yet to really have managed. No, at Wealdstone, I just can't see them doing well. And I think Truro will be able to win this game 2-1. How do you see it going?
Yeah, well, I think you might be looking for a new co-host at this rate, Luke. I think saying that Wealdstone are going to go down and then to lose. I think Truro feel fairly at home in this one. The pitch isn't great. And obviously they've had history of playing on poor pitches when they were in the league below. And when they're under Watton. I don't know. I think Wealdstone, they've always got something about them. And I think they'll be looking to get off to a good start. I quite like the side they've assembled. I think on their day, I think they'll be really good. But unfortunately, I think they'll have too many off days. But I am going to back them to get something here. I'm going to go 2-2, another 2-2. I think Tyler Harvey might get off to the score sheet. Wouldn't be at all surprised if it's a penalty. Typical Tyler Harvey. I think potentially one of the new boys for Wealdstone may shine. Maybe an Omar Musa goal to get him off to a good start.
Moving on to the next fixture. For me, game of the game week, I think, overall. Carlisle United, first fixture back in this National League for over 20 years, coming up against a working side that I think are going to be really, really tough to break down this season. And I think they'll be able to grind out results. And I think they'll actually do better against the better sides like Carlisle. You spoke earlier about Scunthorpe and them having a bit of a reality check. I feel it's harsh because I haven't seen that many Carlisle fans come down and say they're going to, for example, piss the league overall. But maybe I'm totally wrong. I get the impression that there's a small section that probably think that with the quality that they're going to get, that this, I'm not saying they think it's going to be a breeze, but they think they're going to be instantly up there. And this is like Scunthorpe, not the sort of fixture that I think that Carlisle would want. Working away, new ownership, ended last season well. Like I said, really hard to break down. Will stop Carlisle from playing. I think they'll just man-mark the likes of Linney out of the game. And for me, I think it'll be a draw for me overall. I've actually gone for a 1-1 draw. I just don't think Carlisle will get too many chances. And I think Woking, to be honest, they're a really good side for me this season overall. And I don't even think that would be a bad result for Carlisle, to be honest, if they actually did get a point away at Woking for the first game of the game week. And I think for any side that's new to the division, you'd want to be at home. Obviously, I think everyone on the first game of the game week, first season wants to be at home. But particularly if you've just come up or just been relegated, when you're a big club as well with a big fan base, you want to be at home. And you're going away to a side that I think summarised the National League as a whole as a really physical and tough side to play against, which I'd describe the National League as a whole in Woking. I just think it's going to be a tough game for Carlisle, and I think it'll be a 1-1 draw. How do you see it going?
Yeah, I'm pretty well aligned there. I think I'm also going to go for a draw. I think Woking will find a way to get something from this game. And sorry, Woking fans, I think I'm going to be a little bit poor, and I'm actually going to go for what is hopefully the only one of the game week. I'm actually going to go for 0-0.
I was tempted, to be fair, to put that. I just think defensively both are very strong. You look at Carlisle going forward, but it's going to take time, isn't it, for them all to come together, I think.
Yeah.
And when they're coming up against a very strong defence, I think they're going to struggle to score. So I kind of get your point there. I was going 1-1 or 0-0, to be fair. Moving on to the next fixture then that we will take a look at. I think it's Yeovil versus Hartlepool. These two sides for me, I think, will be in very similar positions coming the end of the season. I expect them both to be either on the fringes of the playoffs or just sneaking into them overall for this fixture. I'm quite optimistic about both sides. The only thing it's obviously Hartlepool with the owner. But on the field, how I'm judging it, I think they'll both do well this season. I'm going to go for a draw for this game. Like I said, I think they'll both be in very similar positions. I think defensively both are pretty strong for me. I'm going to go for another 1-1 draw. How do you see it going?
Yeah, I think it'll be a very cagey game. I think Yeovil will have. There has been one or two murmurings during the summer, and I think obviously Hartlepool perhaps won't be at their best yet because of the amount of players that they've changed. And I'm actually going to back Yeovil to get off to a winning start. I'm going to go 2-1. I think that they'll. It's a sort of game that potentially I think Yeovil could go 1-0 down in and find a way to come back and grind out a win. I don't think it'll be pretty, but I think they'll find a way to get something and to get off to a winning start.
Final game of the game week, York versus Sutton. York, of course, coming up just short last season. 96 points required, and they didn't get promoted. They knew the rules before the season had started, so there'll be a bit of sympathy there. But to be fair, they knew what this division was like, and they knew only 2 got promoted. And, of course, they failed in the playoffs to Oldham. They're not letting up, though, this season with the additions that they've made, which, although on paper looks very good to add even more depth to what they had last season, it also comes with its problems, particularly for the manager and keeping squad morale happy overall, because unlike last season, they've got a similar amount of depth. I don't think they're particularly a lot bigger squad because they've let a lot of players go out on loan. The issue is they've got more depth and quality, which means as well that those players sitting on the bench will not like sitting on the bench. Those players missing out on the subs bench won't like sitting out on the subs bench. And it'll also take time to find that best 11 for me overall, because the 5 or 6 players for me, bar 1 or 2, will all be demanding to start. Ollie Banks, Ash Palmer, Newby, Ollie. These are players for me that will all want to start in the National League this season for York. But you look at last season's squad, is it really fair that starting 11 from last season that played week in, week out get dropped to the likes of Tyrese Sinclair, who could potentially be out of favour? For me, overall, no. So I am a little concerned about squad morale overall and finding that best 11. But then again, they've still got, you look at, I know it's a totally different level, but you look at Man City and they've got that depth. And you could say when you've got a winning team, players, Rob mentioned it, players don't particularly mind being on the bench when you're winning. And I think York this season, if they got 96 points last season, they're no weaker, they're stronger, if anything. I think they'll be fine. And they're coming up against a Sutton side that I don't think will be poor either. But I do think York, particularly at home, I can't see many teams going there this season and getting anything. So I'm actually going to go for a 2-0 York win. How do you see it going?
Yeah, well, wouldn't it just be very apt for the National League if Sutton win? Yeah, I think York will want to lay their stall out fairly well. I think they want to come out and basically lay down a marker of what they're about this season. Because obviously there's been a lot of talk this summer about them going and winning the league. I really like Sutton. I think they'll get in the playoffs. However, I think it will be fairly comfortable on the opening day. Just that experience in York's side. And I'm going to go for 3-0.
Fair enough then overall. That wraps up our predictions overall. Yeah, I think that more or less, that'll also wrap up the podcast too. Please, for everyone that is with us tonight, please remember to, of course, like and subscribe. If you're new to this and this is your first show, this isn't a one-off. We'll be doing this every single week. Hopefully when Paul is back as well, we'll be back to a Thursday too. Overall, content-wise, it won't be letting up this season. Hoping that this is going to be a season where we really do come on as well in terms of more content that we're going to produce. I'm looking to produce more. Hopefully we'll try and get a few interviews with managers like we've done in the past, and potentially even record some footage at games about our days and match day vlogs kind of thing that I'm hoping to do as well this season. But no, thanks for the support, particularly on last season and the support in pre-season and since we've come back as a podcast. Of course, we're only just getting going. Restarting this season, I should say. So I do really appreciate that everyone that's tuned in tonight. As well, Joe, thanks for joining me once again. Do you want to give NL Full Time and, of course, your book once again a plug?
Yeah. So NL Full Time will be no doubt recording sometime on Sunday, review of the first day, and we'll obviously be bringing you coverage all season of all three national leagues. And then, Off the Line blog. My blog just got finished our predictions today. And my book, Diamonds in the Rough, out a couple of weeks. Get that on Amazon, as well as Waterstones, the Rich Smiths, etc. So,
Joe, once again, thanks for joining me. I do really appreciate it. If you'd like to see our sponsors' cards accepted, there's a link in the description for you to do that. No contracts or monthly fees, and you get 50% off your order if you do use that link in the description. If you want to become a channel member, it's just £2.99 a month. You can use custom emojis for your club. Any Carlisle fans that are here, if you want to put your club in the live chat, then if you join the channel, you will be able to use that Carlisle United badge overall. You'll get early access to interviews as well too. That more or less wraps everything up. Remember to like and subscribe. Joe, thanks for joining me once again, and we will see you next time. Bye for now.